All right, we're going to go ahead and continue our discussion with multiplying polynomials, and we're going to move away from the power rule and product rule and the multiplication of just monomials. And we're going to look at multiplying a monomial by a polynomial. And that's any polynomial. It could be a binomial, trinomial, or something larger than that. Right. So when we're going ahead and multiplying monomial by polynomial, we need to use the distribution property. I can't spell today. All right. And what these are going to look like, we're going to have something like x times x plus 3. Okay. Where what we need to do is take the x here on the outside and multiply it by each piece on the inside strictly using the distribution property. All right. And this is going to follow our product rule. So we don't have any powers on the outside of our parentheses. Okay. And so if I multiply this one, I have x times x. Remember, there's ones out there. So x to the 1 plus 1 is x squared. Now 3 doesn't have an x, and x is positive on the outside. We're going to keep the plus sign. And 3 times x is just going to be 3x. They're not like, so we're just going to mush them together. All right. If I have, let's say, an x and a x minus 7, okay, now my x on the outside is positive. I'm still going to go ahead and use my distribution property for both of these. And so I have x to the first time and x to the first, so I add the exponents, I get x squared. Now x on the outside is positive, but the 7 on the inside is a negative because of that minus. And a negative times a positive gives me a negative or minus, and x times 7 gives me 7x. All right. If the x on the outside is negative, all right, now we got to go ahead and be really careful. Now our exponents are still 1 on the x's. All right, I'm still going to use the distribution property. Okay, and remember my signs. We've talked about this guy before. And now I have a negative times a positive. Negative times a positive. It's going to be a negative x to the 1 plus 1, which is 2. I have a negative and a negative. That's going to give me a plus. And 3 times x is just 3x. All right, so signs are going to be a thing, so make sure that you're double checking your signs and making sure that those sign changes happen all the way across the board here. All right, let's look at a bunch of examples. Again, I encourage you to try these out before I do them by pausing the video. So here I have 5x times 3x plus 4. Using the distribution property, I go ahead and I have to multiply the numbers. So 5 times 3 is 15. X to the first times x to the first, add the exponents, x squared. Plus 5 times 4 is 20. And then x just gets put on the outside. Okay. Now let's look at one. Now this is not a binomial, this is a trinomial. It doesn't matter because we did say we were going to do all polynomials. Be careful, do one at a time. All right. So this a here has an exponent of 1, this a here has an exponent of 1, and I have 7a times a squared. So it looks like this. Okay, so remember I go ahead and add my exponents. So I have 7a to the 2 plus 1, which is 3, and that's my first term. And seeing as this is a trinomial, I should have 3 terms as my answer. I should get a trinomial back. 7a times 2a, 7 times 2 is 14. They're both positive, so plus 14. a to the 1 plus 1 is a squared. 7a times negative 3. So positive times a negative gives me a negative. 3 times 7 is 21. And the a just stays. All right. Now notice what happened with this one is that in the polynomial itself, each of the variables went up by 1a. All right. A squared became a to the third, a to the first became a squared, and 3a to the 0 power became a to the first power. And this is going to happen. You should go up by the amount of variables on the outside. In this case, we only have 1. So it should go up by 1 each time. So this is a good way to go ahead and check yourselves to make sure that you're doing the problem properly. On this one, we have a negative on the outside. So this is going to change all my signs on the inside when I distribute it. So a negative times a positive is going to give me a negative. So pay attention to your signs first as you're doing it. 2 times 3 is 6. X to the first and x to the first. X to the 1 plus 1 is x squared. A negative times a negative is going to give me a plus. 2 times 2 is 4. The x tags on. And notice with this one is when I have a negative on the outside, the signs for each of these change. And that should be true. It's like when we take a negative and distribute it through. It's like a -1. And it changes my signs. Okay, same idea here. So make sure that you do a quick check of your signs when you're doing the distribution. So that you don't, just get something wrong because of sign. All right. Now we have something, we got a little bit higher powers. That's okay. It's still the product rule. I have -4, so I have a negative on the outside. Negative 4x squared times x squared. So I have a -4, because a negative and a positive give me a negative. X squared plus x squared, or multiplied by x squared, add the exponents, x to the 4th. The second piece, a negative and a negative give me a plus. Now this y has nothing in common with what's on the outside. All right? So we're going to have a 4x squared, and that y is just going to tag on. This happens in multiplication. Do not let it concern you. Do not let it mess you up. Just tag it on just as if it was a number being multiplied by a variable. It's the same idea. Okay, so you could just go ahead and distribute it, tag it on, it's all multiplication. Couple more for you here. Here we have a nice positive on the outside, a trinomial with all negatives on the inside, all minus signs. But my first term is positive. So as I distribute, I got 9x times x squared. So 9 times 1, because remember there's an invisible 1 coefficient, is 9. X to the first, and x squared, add the exponents, x to the 3. A positive and a negative give me a negative. 6 times 9 is 54. X to the first times x to the first, add the exponents, x squared. Positive and a negative give me a negative. 9 times 3 is 27, and the x just tags on. Now, most of the time you're going to see a monomial with a binomial or a trinomial, which is all we've seen so far, but you can have something bigger. Okay, so here's a four-term polynomial with a monomial on the outside. And this means at the end of this, you should still have 4 terms. So please understand, if everything in here is not like terms, you're going to have 4 terms in your polynomial when you're done. So make sure you get your look for that. Okay, so this is x to the first on the outside. So 3x times x cubed is 3x to the 1 plus 3, or 4. Positive and a positive give me a plus. 2 times 3 is 6. X plus x squared is x to the third. Positive times a negative give me a minus. 6 times 3 is 18. X to the first and x to the first. X to the 1 plus 1 is 2. My last one is 3x times 7. So 3 is positive, so it's a plus. 7 times 3 is 21, and the x tags on at the end. And all the things happened. Okay, none of my signs changed, so my third term should still have a minus in the front, that's true. And all of my exponents should have gone up by 1 from the original, and they did. So go ahead and practice on the problems I gave you. And if you have any questions, make sure to go ahead and ask them in class, and I will see you in the next video.